When thinking of a racing game, most will probably think of two different genres. There are your party racers like Mario Kart or Crash Team Racing, where you have a ton of items at your disposal causing chaos on the track, and a living room you and your friends are in. Then, there are your more realistic racing games. Think a game like Gran Turismo, something that pushes the technical limits of a console or PC and tries to accomplish a somewhat realistic driving feel. The next series I want to look at kind of falls somewhere in the middle if you ask me. That series is F-Zero. Even though it hasn't been seen too often in modern times, except for Captain Falcon's consistent appearance in the Super Smash Bros. Series, it's still a franchise that has a dedicated fan base eagerly waiting for its next installment, whenever that may be. Before we got to this point, however, F-Zero was a simple racing game released in the launch window of the Super Nintendo way back in the early 90s. Considering the game is turning 35 in November, dear God, is it still a fun time today? Let's take a look and find out. F-Zero was created by Nintendo's Entertainment Analysis and Development Division, or EAD for short. Only 9 people within Nintendo EAD created this game, including the legendary Shigeru Miyamoto. Miyamoto is one of the gaming industry's most influential figures, being responsible for many franchises, his most famous being Mario and Zelda, of course. Here, he was a producer for this game, and he would have his hands in future releases like F-Zero X and F-Zero GX. The main goal of the first F-Zero was the same as many other racing games, to show off the power and graphical capabilities of Nintendo's newest release, the Super Nintendo Entertainment System. The way this would be done was through the use of Mode 7. This was a technique that allowed the Super Nintendo to create pseudo 3D graphics without using anything like polygons or vector graphics. The result of this would be a really cool effect that does seem like the Super Nintendo is producing 3D graphics. Now, we wouldn't actually see the Super Nintendo do 3D until the creation of the Super FX chip, but this is a pretty good substitute, I'd say. I love the way they did this effect because it makes these head-on perspective racers way more tolerable. If you look at something like Pole Position or Rad Racer, they try something similar and, in my eyes, it doesn't work. I have a terrible time judging my position and how much I'm drifting in these games, and it leads to me crashing my car all over the place. This is how it should be done, if you ask me. Staying on the topic with how this game looks, I think the art style of the game is pretty alright overall. There's nothing crazy groundbreaking, besides the Mode 7 of course, but even though it's simple, it does work. I think all the cars look pretty nice overall, but the background elements are kind of odd. Like, it doesn't look bad or distracting when you're actually racing, but if you do look at it for more than like 3 seconds, it looks like a whole bunch of random BS is moving just for the sake of it moving. I'm also a big fan of the soundtrack. It's got some classic songs in here like Mute City and Big Blue, stuff that's been remixed and remade many times over the years, usually in Super Smash Bros. Other highlights to me are Deathwind, Silence, and Red Canyon. It's overall a good soundtrack, but it's nowhere near the highs of later games in the series. Oh, just you wait till F-Zero X, I'm so excited! Considering this is the first installment of the series, the gameplay overall is pretty simple as well. There are some stark differences compared to other racing games of that time, however. The biggest one being is that you go really goddamn fast. Most other racing games are fast, but you won't be thrown off the track by how fast you're going. Here, you go at crazy fast speeds to the point where bouncing off a single other car can lead you to pinball all over the course. There's a reason why there's walls on the sides of these tracks. It's so you don't go careening off of them and die. I'm sure back in the early 90s, this type of speed was unreal to see in a video game. Nowadays, while still challenging at times, it's not crazy hard to manage. I think the cars control just fine too. You accelerate with the B button and boost with the A button. You get these boosts after each lap and can only hold 3 at a time, so you gotta pick your spots on when to use them. You can also shift your weight left and right using the L and R buttons, and this allows you to drift. Drifting is essential if you want to take any of the sharp turns that are littered in almost every track in this game. If you don't drift properly, or don't drift at all, you're going to get familiar with the wall very quickly. Like any other racing game, your goal would be to go through a certain amount of tracks racing to get to first place. However, you may come to notice that no matter where you place in all of these courses, the game ends the same. At the end of each cup, you get a compilation of your performances for each course, and those times are saved in your records. So then, what's the real objective of F-Zero then? It's to survive. Yup, just finishing a circuit in this game is pretty much an achievement. This game is pretty tough compared to any other racing game, even just as a game in general it's pretty tough. You're going to be dealing with a lot of shit no matter what circuit you start with. Let's start with the racers themselves. Now in the manual, you can see you can race as Captain Falcon, Dr. Stewart, Pico, and Samurai Goro. Each car has kind of its own archetype too. The Blue Falcon is fairly well balanced, the Golden Fox has great acceleration, the Wild Goose can take a lot of punishment, and the Fire Stingray is the best one. Unlike every other car, it doesn't slip-slide around like it's on ice every time you drift. I think it's a great car for beginners, and I think it's my favorite out of all the 4 of them. That's why I used it for most of my footage. Whoever you don't choose ends up being part of the racing pack, and these guys have some interesting AI. I swear, the Golden Fox always ends up in front, even when you're way ahead of him. You know, speaking of which, a lot of the other racers have some crazy rubber banding too. You gotta really work to get comfortably ahead of these guys. What I really hate are the other random cars scattered around each of the maps. These aren't even real racers. They're just some random numbnuts whose sole purpose is to fuck with you and only you. In theory, they're obstacles to every racer, but that's just that, a theory. I've never once seen the computer racers actually get tripped up by these things. They always perfectly weave through traffic, meanwhile I'm getting thrown all over the place. I've even seen racers pass straight through each other like it's nothing. I mean, how is that even possible? Moral of the story, the computer isn't very fair, but that's pretty much par for the course for any other old racing game if I'm being honest. Besides the cars you drive, the most important parts of a racing game are the tracks you drive on. I think as the first game in the series, F-Zero's track selection is fine overall. You'll race through many different areas, some of which have multiple tracks. While some are your basic tracks like Mute City or Big Blue, there are others that have their own gimmicks. Deathwind has, well, wind that pushes you around. Port Town has magnets that drag you into the walls and damage you, and Red Canyon has a ton of jumps and zigzags. While they're interesting gimmicks, I don't think they really all work. I especially hate the magnets because I feel that it's nearly impossible to race properly even when you're trying to avoid them how you're supposed to. At least with the wind and Deathwind, it's still annoying, but it isn't the worst thing to work around. Now, it's probably just a skill issue on my part, I will admit. After all, the game is hard, like I've said before. Also, quick side note, fuck this jump in Whiteland 2. This is the last track in the Queen Cup, and its main gimmick is the big-ass jump towards the end of it. The only way you're getting over is if you have a decent amount of speed and you're holding down the D-pad in midair so you can get some extra distance on your jump. That doesn't sound too hard in theory, but if you just get slowed down a little bit by either the wall or another racer, you will not make this jump. This is actually the only track I didn't complete for this review. I knew from the jump, no pun intended, I was going to get angry over it, so I didn't even bother. Besides that though, I think the tracks work just fine. That's really all there is to see with the original F-Zero. It's a basic high-speed racer that's fun in short spurts, but it's aged a bit. However, we aren't exactly done with the Super Nintendo just yet, because F-Zero would actually get 2 sequels on this system. The only caveat is that they weren't exactly released in the most traditional of means. Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to introduce you to the Satellaview. This was a satellite modem add-on to the Super Famicom created by Nintendo and radio subsidiary Saint Giga. Not only could you download games from the service, some games were provided with real-time radio commentary. You could also view specific magazines such as Nintendo Power or Famitsu, which was a Japanese gaming magazine. While it wasn't a massive commercial failure, the add-on did eventually fall into obscurity, and many of its games and real-time broadcasts were lost to time. It's not like the add-on didn't get support either. A lot of Nintendo's premier franchises like Mario, Zelda, Kirby, and Fire Emblem all saw releases on this thing. Even third-party companies got a little bit involved too. You remember that remake of Chrono Cross that came out a few years ago? Well, that included a game, Radical Dreamers, which was a text-based adventure game on the Satellaview, and pretty much served as the inspiration to Chrono Cross. It's not exactly the same, some things were switched around in Chrono Cross, and Radical Dreamers in and of itself is technically considered an alternate universe canonically, but my point is, the add-on was way more impactful than some people realize. It truly is a fascinating piece of hardware, and I know I haven't even scratched the surface of its whole story. After this video, I actually recommend you to go look on YouTube and watch videos about the Satellaview. It's so cool to me. I think it's sick that they actually did this back in the day. Anyway, where was I? Oh yeah, F-Zero. 2 installments of the game were released over the span of late 1996 to mid-1997. Those games were BS F-Zero Grand Prix and BS F-Zero Grand Prix 2. For future reference, I'll be referring to these games as Grand Prix 1 and Grand Prix 2. Grand Prix 1 was broadcast in 4 parts from December 29, 1996 to January 24, 1997. A new cup was added, the Ace Cup, and along with the 15 tracks returning from the first game, 4 new tracks were added to the end of each cup. Those are Sandstorm in the Night Cup, Sandstorms 2 in the Queen Cup, Silence 2 in the King Cup, and finally Big Blue in the Ace Cup. There are also 4 new racing vehicles, all driven by the same racers from the first game. Captain Falcon gets the Blue Thunder, Dr. Stewart gets the Luna Bomber, Pico gets the Green Amazon, and Samurai Goro gets the Fire Scorpion. Grand Prix 2 doesn't add anything in terms of cars, but there are 6 more tracks to race on. There's Mute City 4, Forests 1, 2, and 3, and Metal Force 1 and 2. In reality, these are a little more than expansions to the first game. Cool expansions? I'd say so. I'm always a big fan of seeing new content in a game. It's just very unfortunate these games haven't been officially brought over to America through the Switch Classic lineup or anything. The content from Grand Prix 1 did eventually come over in an update for F-Zero 99, a battle royale game based on F-Zero. I would look at this game here since it's the same style as the original F-Zero, but I haven't played it and I refuse to give Nintendo any more of my money for their online service. Still, it is cool to see that some of the lost content did get saved in the end. I do wish Grand Prix 2's content wasn't left in the dust though. However, if you do want the full BS F-Zero experience, there are unofficial ways to do so. There's a fan patch out there that actually includes the content from both BS F-Zeros into one package. This is a really cool achievement in gaming preservation, something I wish every game company would take note of. I recorded footage of the Satellaview games using this fan patch, by the way, and it works very well. It separates the Satellaview tracks into two different cups, the aptly named BSX League 1 and League 2 cups. There was a ton of attention to detail put into this too. Since there aren't any official ROM dumps of Grand Prix 2 to my knowledge, the developers sifted through old grainy VHS footage uploaded to YouTube to recreate the Forest and Metal 4 courses. That is some true love to a game series right there. If you have the know-how, this is a nice little patch to add to the original game. Overall, F-Zero did exactly what its job was supposed to be. It not only was a pretty fun racing game for the time, it also showed off the graphical prowess of the Super Nintendo. It did quite well financially, and to this day it remains the best-selling game in the series, selling over 2 million units. That's simultaneously very impressive and kinda sad, honestly. This game also served as the inspiration for other racing games like Daytona USA, so this game certainly made its mark on the industry. Today though, I think it's still an alright racer. It'll still feel pretty antiquated due to its age, but I think even newer gamers could find some enjoyment out of it. Although personally, I'd say much better times for the F-Zero series are ahead of us, and we'd only have to look one more game in the future to see why.